Hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado, and I hope you're doing well. We're in another special session, third year in a row. Definitely check out the other videos I'm putting out this week. I got a lot of coverage. I'm going to be going down there to the state capitol to talk about what's happening. But here are three things that I think you need to know just right at the beginning of this whole special session fiasco. The first thing you got to know is that the reason we're having a special session is because, as the media portrays it, as these Democrat legislators portray it, we have $1 billion deficit, nearly $1 billion deficit for our state legislature to make up, to reduce spending, or figure out how to raise revenue during the special session time period. Well, the reason they have this deficit is because the federal government, under this One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I hate even calling it that because it's just such a mouthful, but HR 1, just for simplicity's sake, it created $1 billion tax cut in Colorado, $1 billion tax cut. So that means the people of Colorado, business owners, companies, corporations, employers, workers, families, anybody who pays taxes in Colorado is going to save money to the tune of $1 billion on the whole. Now that's great. That's exactly what we need is $1 billion injection back into the private sector. Take it away from these greedy politicians and their ridiculous agenda and give it back to the people who are actually employing people, Coloradans, who are people producing things in our state and people who are actually earning a paycheck. So I thought this article, this headline from CompleteColorado.com really encapsulated kind of that first point I wanted to make, which is Colorado's budget gap means more money in taxpayers' pockets. Now, I've talked about this before, but I cannot stop talking about this because you don't hear this in the traditional media. They're just talking about, oh my gosh, the state government doesn't have the money to meet all their obligations and how terrible that is. Well, yeah, $1 billion back to the people who are actually earning money in Colorado, the people who are actually making money and producing. I mean, that's a great thing here. So important stuff for sure. So this article here from Nash Herman, the One Big Beautiful Bill. On July 30th, legislative leadership met with analysts from the governor's office and legislative council staff to learn more about the impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OBA, on the state budget. Despite slightly different estimates, both groups of analysts agreed that a significant budget deficit would emerge this year due to the immediate impacts of the OBA on state tax collection. Ironically, the total lost revenue due to taxpayer friendly adjustments in federal tax policy amounts to approximately $1.2 billion, about 2.5% of the budget. However, the state will likely only need to come up with around $1 billion, as some state tax credits will not be triggered if certain revenue thresholds are not crossed. Unlike the previous shortfall, which was one of wants over needs, this deficit is due to tax relief. That's the key point there, folks. Tax relief that takes effect immediately, reducing state revenue due to Colorado's rolling conformity. You're going to hear that a lot with federal tax policy. This basically means Colorado risks not having enough money for their appropriations that were confirmed when lawmakers balanced the budget earlier this year. So, I mean, that's huge. I think that's one of the biggest things that people need to know is that we're in this situation because people of Colorado are getting more money back. That's huge. And of course, you're going to see the talking points from the left saying it's a bailout for the billionaires, and all these people who are relying on government services are the ones that are going to suffer. Well, folks, the reality is, sure, you pay more taxes because you earn $1 million, $1 billion a year, whatever it is. You're paying a lot of taxes. You earn more, you pay more. That's how our tax code works in the United States and in Colorado. You get taxed on the amount you earn. So, of course, you're paying a lot more into it. You're going to receive a bigger tax cut. But in reality, if you look at kind of this middle 20% here, and this is from a group here that is not necessarily friendly for liberty, but they even show 43,300 to 92,100. That's $1,500. $1,500 huge. If you make 92,000 to 153,000, it's $2,300. I mean, that's nothing to laugh at, folks. There's people out there struggling to pay their bills, make ends meet, and you have a couple people working who can now have an extra mortgage payment paid for, their car payments, a month's worth of expenses potentially. I mean, this is good. This is good for the economy. It's good for the people of Colorado to get this money back. So, important stuff there. I think that's a distinction that needs to be mentioned. The state legislature did their little presentation these last few weeks, but this one's from August 5th, 2025. Links at freestatecolorado.com, of course. But they really break it down in terms of the different tax sections of HR 1, the big beautiful bill, the individual income tax extension and expansion, the new individual income tax exemptions, extending and expanding exemptions for businesses, the catch-all, all these different changes to our tax code that is really means that the people of Colorado are getting a lot more money back. And of course, from the state's perspective, from the government's perspective, it's negative because they're talking about millions of dollars, right? In 2026, fiscal year 2026, you're talking about $500,000 to $300 million. From corporate, $900 million to $700 million. It's a lot of money that the state government's going to miss out on. But that's money for employers, for workers, for job creation. And I think that's so important. I think people really need to be aware that this tax cut from HR 1 is a massive win for the people of Colorado, for businesses, for employers, for everything that really matters to people, the whole economy, the whole people of Colorado, not just the special interests that receive these government handouts. So that's step one. And I really think we need it more than ever here in Colorado because, as the CPR article shows, the business confidence in Colorado is in very, very pessimistic territory. This is July 1st, 2025. The economy's not doing great. We need a massive tax cut. We need a massive injection of money back into our private sector if we really want to turn things around. Sales tax revenue is declining in more than half of Colorado counties. That is huge. This article is back from June 27th, 2025. Because people don't have money. Inflation's through the roof. The cost of living is through the roof. We need tax cuts. We need more money back in our wallets. Here's some Colorado politics from June 18th, 2025. Economists, Colorado's economic outlook turns grim as recession risk reaches 50%. So while all these state legislators are crying and complaining about the lost revenue, you got to understand it's something that can actually really help Colorado and provide an economy that's going to be able to employ people and keep people working, which is what we need for sure. So I think that's really the first thing you need to know about the special session, why we're having it, why it's a good thing. And the state legislators need to step up. They need to be adults and they need to cut spending. They need to cut spending because they lost revenue. Just like your household at home, you lose your job, you lose your pay, you got to cut your expenses. That's just how it goes. And that's what the state government needs to do. They do not need to be trying to figure out ways to steal more of our money. So, number two, the second thing you really need to know about this special session is that it's all being planned behind closed doors. These bills are written out of the public eye. There's limited ability for citizen participation. You have these legislators with their lobbyists and all their little buddies and cronies from other state government agencies figuring out what tweaks they can make to tax policy, to all these different departments in our state government. And of course, so much of it's happening out of the public eye. So you got to watch my video with Natalie Menton, my recent one, if you haven't seen it. But you can go onto the state legislator website. At the time of filming, these are the only bills that have been released. And we talked about this on my video with Natalie. But you can see a list of bills. There's at least up to 100 bills that can be um, sponsored during the special session, where you can have one legislator can each get a bill. Some can get more if they leadership deems it necessary. But just look at the bill numbers on here. Now, these are temporary numbers, but nonetheless, bill number 42, number 37, number 43. So, I mean, there's at least that many bills that were crafted. Sure, some of them could be withdrawn. Some of them could be, discarded because they duplicated work or they didn't think it was a good idea after all. But nonetheless, you have dozens and dozens, upwards of 100 pieces of legislation, bills that affect Colorado's fiscal policy being crafted behind closed doors, and the public's going to have a very limited opportunity to actually participate in this so-called democratic process. We're not going to have advance notice for the most part of some of these horrible policy positions, is what I'm assuming are they're going to be able to go down there, talk to our state legislators, speak in committee hearings, and really have a voice. The public is being left out of this process, and that is something that is so huge for these legislators who claim to believe in democracy and an open and representative government. They fail more times than not. Really, the third thing I really want to talk about is Medicaid funding. So you're going to see that if you haven't already. Oh my gosh, all these people are losing their health care coverage. All these people are losing their Medicaid money because of HR 1, because of this one big beautiful bill. But let's dig into a little bit about Medicaid and see what's going on there. So you can see this recent Denver Post article. Colorado sues federal health agency, HHS, to stop sharing of Medicaid data with ICE. Now, why would the state of Colorado be concerned that immigration's enforcement has Medicaid data? Well, because there's probably illegal aliens who are using Medicaid. If that's the case, that should be making everybody in Colorado angry and upset. You work so hard, you struggle to pay your bills, and they take that money and give it to people who are not even illegally in the country. So that's one thing we need to know about Medicaid here in Colorado. Another thing is from what our governor says, you can go to his website, here's his little dashboard about all the federal funding cuts to Colorado, and you can read his little statement here, totally politicized, talking about how this reducing Medicaid funding will result in billions of dollars in cuts to the state budget, cause 100,000 plus Coloradans to lose healthcare coverage, and put significant financial strain on rural hospitals and health providers. I mean, it sounds pretty doom and gloom, but let's dig into some of the truth here. You're going to see a lot of these talking points if you haven't already. So, this is from our state government as well. This is their presentation back on July 30th, specifically around Medicaid under H.R. 1. So some of the changes here, prohibited entity funding. So part of HR 1 was prohibiting who's going to get that Medicaid dollars. And not too shocking, but Planned Parenthood is no longer going to receive Medicaid money, which I think is a great thing. I don't think they should be getting any taxpayer money, specifically because if you type in Planned Parenthood on our state Secretary of State's website for campaign finance, you could see in 2020 they're spending $200,000, $300,000. They're spending $500,000 over the last 5 years on election campaigns here in Colorado. So, of course, in Colorado, they're so buddy buddy with Planned Parenthood, the Democrat legislators are, because they're helping get them elected. So, yeah, good. They should lose federal funding. And of course, our state government says, well, 14,000 people might be using their Medicaid benefits at Planned Parenthood or other type of organizations that could lose that. Well, they can go somewhere else, folks. And if they can't, well, we shouldn't be supporting that horrible organization to begin with. Two here, qualified alien changes. So, of course, qualified alien means somebody who's not a U.S. citizen. And there could be 7,000 people in October 2026 that are going to lose their Medicaid coverage because they are not U.S. citizens. I don't know. Hard to argue that that's a bad thing. Ultimately, should these medical benefits, these social welfare programs be going to people who are not U.S. citizens? I don't think so. I think most people would probably agree with that. Now they're having 6 month verification. So folks, I'm showing you all the doom and gloom about Medicaid and the reality of it here. So in Colorado, they have every 12 months, you got to prove that you're still deserve to get those Medicaid benefits, right? You're still qualified. You fit within the parameters of the program. Well, the federal government's changing it to every 6 months. They're saying, hey, listen, a year is too long. Let's make it so every 6 months, people who are on Medicaid basically have to prove why they still qualify to get Medicaid. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me. Things change and maybe we can cut down on some of that fraud, waste, and abuse. Not necessarily a bad thing there. So, of course, our state government says, that could be 377,000 people impacted by that. This new complicated system we have to change within our state government, within how we do all of this with the computers and this and that could mean that, these people aren't able to, they're going to lose some coverage for a short amount of time. Sure, fair point there. New work requirements. So, are these Medicaid programs and social welfare programs really designed to have people on them forever? Or should there be some sort of requirements for them to at least do some work or volunteer or get involved? I think most people would agree with that. But again, our state legislator says that, well, 377,000 people could be impacted because we're making that change to our system to reflect that. And, these people now have to go through this. I don't know, folks. I mean, that's some of the big stuff there. The prohibited entity, 14,000, reducing access, just to scroll down a little more, 7,000 lawful immigrants, so but not U.S. citizens, losing Medicaid coverage. The 6 month renewal, it could in the work requirements can make it so that people have a little bit of coverage lost in between all of that. I don't know, folks. These are government programs that we're all paying for. Having the stricter requirements for them doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. So I think those are some of the big things you need to be aware of. You really need to know about the special session. There's so much propaganda around it. The Democrats are using it as their opportunity to push back against Trump and the Republican minority in our state government. But another great article here from Nash Herman over at Complete Colorado. Dems desperate to deflect blame for self-inflicted budget wound. And definitely got to read this one. I think it's key to understanding some of this. This is from August 12th, 2025. As you'll see, the Democrats are out there blaming OBA, we'll call it here, because of this rolling conformity with federal tax policy. State revenues are decreasing immediately due to taxpayer-friendly changes in the OBA, putting more money back into Colorado taxpayers' pockets, leaving a shortfall in the previously balanced budget. Now, what's interesting here is he says, what they neglect to mention, however, is that the legislature has been aware of a structural budget shortfall for years. It was already considering the possibility of a special session before the OBA was even passed. Reality is finally catching up, and potential solutions to filling the budget gap highlight Colorado's underlying budget problems. For example, part of Governor Polis's proposal to close the budget gap is to tap into the state reserves. So interesting stuff there. The claim two, TABOR exacerbates budget woes. The reason we have such a great state reserve is because of TABOR, as Natalie pointed out in our video. You can read this as well. But as Nash Herman says, actually, TABOR is a simple and yet very popular provision in the state constitution that allows for a modest limit on the growth of an ever shrinking portion of the state budget based on the formula of population plus inflation. It also requires voters' consent before raising new taxes. Those crying wolf over the OBA claim that if Colorado did not have TABOR, it could simply increase taxes to raise revenue to fill the budget hole. Saying the quiet part out loud, Colorado legislators want to discard Coloradans' right to consent to taxation because it forces them into fiscal responsibility. Ironically, the inflation caused by a flood of federal COVID-19 spending actually facilitated more spending by the state legislature than would have otherwise been the case thanks to the TABOR formula. So, of course, our state government is spend happy. They need to cut costs, and that's the reality of it. Don't let these Democratic legislators convince you otherwise. And we have to hold them accountable. We have to speak out. We have to stand up, and we have to say no more. Give us our tax cuts. Give us our tax money back. We need it. People are struggling in our society. We don't need these greedy governments taking any more of our money. Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.